Hi, it's Richard here from Intelligent Advisor IT Consulting with a video about our data model viewer. Before we get into the data model viewer itself, where did it come from? The idea came from a feature of previous versions of Oracle Policy Modeling. This is version 10 that I have in front of me, where if you load in a project, and for this quick demo, I've loaded in the healthy eating example project from version 10. You could go into the View tab and basically view the data model. And you could see the entities and the attributes and the relationships. And you had these cute little icons to tell you what kind of attribute they were and so on. There are other features, but really that's what I was interested in. And I was then interested in not only having this information, but being able to easily get it out of the product, or better still, be able to access this information without actually having to run Oracle Policy Modeling at all. Now, this feature that was in version 10 wasn't brought across to version 12, so this gave me an opportunity to go into my garden shed and play around with it for myself. So the tool that I've put on the website is entirely for private use. I wasn't intending to do anything with it, but I decided to let people have it so I can get some feedback and people can tell me what works and what doesn't work. If you've downloaded the tool and you double click setup, it'll take a few seconds to install. If you're a member of the website, it's free, so you don't need to pay anything if you're a free member. And you just install it. There's no certificate. It'll take 2 seconds to install because it's about 7 meg in total. And the first thing that'll happen when you install is it will auto run. And what does it do? It basically wants you to give it a data model file. Now, as you probably know, every version 12 project has a file called project data model that contains most of the data model, not all. We load in that file to begin with and show you the data model. So my advice to you is when you first do it, pick a really simple one, such as this with only 2 entities. And you can see that you have each entity represented by a box. You have the relationship between the two. If you want to, you can select the title bar and you can move them around. It's basically a tool for you to play with. You can notice also that if you select a box, you can scroll it backwards and forwards, which is useful sometimes because it doesn't auto size very well for very large, very long attributes. You've got a bunch of icons, as you can see here, and these are the public names. You'll notice that this attribute doesn't have a public name. We'll talk about this later on, but basically it will flag up any attribute that doesn't have a public name, which may or may not be a concern for you. There's nothing wrong with not having a public name, but just it's worthwhile knowing. You'll notice that this attribute has a strange icon, as opposed to all the others, which are pretty obvious, like Boolean and numbers and text and so on. If I go into that project in Oracle Policy Modeling, you'll notice that that attribute, which was in this entity, has an auto type, meaning that whoever created this attribute has forgotten to go in here and actually explicitly declare the type after the parser had assigned an automatic type. So this was my way of just reminding me that this attribute needed perhaps to have some attention. So I'd need to go into my Oracle Policy Modeling and fix it up. Again, not a big deal. If you want the list of attributes, this is a fairly reliable list of attributes. I'll write in an article why that's not always reliable, and the list of entities, and if you have any lists of values, the list of values. So that's the basic run through. What I recommend is once you've done your first shot with a very simple model like this one, is go into the preferences, and then you can play around with the preferences. You can start to decide not only what do you want to display. Do you want to display the attributes? Do you want to display value lists? Especially in large projects, they can get very, very, very big. Maybe 1,000 attributes and 100 value lists. Do you want to show upload groups, which are parts of the interview, but they're almost treated like entities, so I decided to include them here. And there are things like the link labels, which is the label you can see on any relationship. You could hide those by unchecking this box. Do you want to show decision services? So you could show them in a separate color. And as I called out earlier, not everything is in the project data model file. Some attributes are stored in the XGen files that are generated when you validate your work. So if you want to get a complete picture of all of the attributes from everywhere, you would check this box. But obviously in a very large project, that would be a very, very long list. And you can choose, and I'll write about that later in the articles. You can choose the colors for each of the different kinds of boxes. So I'm going to go for different colors for value lists, for entities. You'll notice already I had chosen a color here for the no public name. The inferred one I'm not actually using at the moment. You can ignore that. Attributes recovered from XGen files, you could maybe highlight them in a different color just for curiosity. Decision services, I'm going to put in orange. If you use a lot of temporal reasoning and you use a keyword to easily identify them, like the word temporal, for example, we could highlight any temporal attributes. And finally, we have a diagram type, which we'll talk about in a little while. Nothing will refresh when you do that. You have to close the application and then open it again, and your settings will be available to you. So I don't do any kind of mega refresh because that would just slow everything down if I had to redraw a very large project on the fly. So I've opened it up again, and I'm going to go and open up another project. So let's pick this one because it happens to have a decision service in it. So boom, there we go. You'll see now if I resize, you can see that I have a decision service. And you can see that it adopted the new green color scheme that I asked. And you can also see that there's an upload group as well down at the bottom. So again, you can play around with these. Nothing really of any interest to report with this. You can experiment. There's also a little scroll bar feature, which you can see here if you have a very long list of attributes. But anyway, so you can mess around with this and it's all very fine. So that's an example of changing the colors and then obviously reorganizing everything so that you can make a nice picture. The idea being is that you probably want to show this to somebody else, or at the very least you want to have some kind of document that you could use to demonstrate the data model that you had. So far so good. So what else do you, and there's my upload group, I'll move that out of the way. It takes a little bit of a while, sometimes with complex modules you might have to play around with these to get the ideal picture. I'll resize to fit. Let's open up another one and let's do another example. This is a much more complex project with many, many more attributes and many, many value lists and a couple of decision services thrown in as well. So you'll see that it will take a reasonable amount of time. I mean, I've tested this on projects that have thousands of entities and thousands of attributes and hundreds of value lists, and it can take up to a minute to fully unload all of the details. But eventually, once it's plugged through all of this, it should start to refresh itself. It basically loads up all the data first and then refreshes itself as it goes along. So we're coming up now probably to a refresh point where it'll start to show the model. There we go. So this is, you can see the red one there was a really big value list. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of really big value lists there, and really, but wow, that's a huge value list. And some entities and a decision service over there you probably saw. So once it's finished doing its work, you can scroll around pretty easily. But I mean, with a really large model, how much of this is going to be digestible quickly, I don't know. So I'll resize this to fit the screen, and you can see that this is a reasonably complex model with a lot of relationships going backwards and forwards. So that's an example of me, pulling out all the stops, all the attributes from everywhere. Let's take a look at the other kinds of diagram that you might want to choose. I've chosen hierarchical for my next attempt. Let's pick one that actually has a hierarchy. So you can see here, this one, I chose hierarchical because, well, it's a hierarchical model. So it has global, then it has the car, then it has the wheel and the bolt, and it has a value list attached to one of the fields of the bolt. So let's choose, the spring one is, okay, let's restart, remember, because it doesn't auto refresh. I'll go in and choose another one of these. Let's choose the garage one again, since that was reasonably successful. And what does this one do? Oh yeah, this is sort of a kind of backwards model. Not sure if it's particularly interesting, but I've included all these different diagram types. You can experiment with them and find the one that you like the most. Nothing stopping you then moving them around afterwards. Oh yeah, let's try this one. Let's choose a suitable, let's keep with the same one since that worked. Okay, so this one, that's not bad. Interesting sort of vertical approach. The idea of all these diagram types is basically just that it can speed up creating a diagram that might be easier to read. Some of them are a bit crazy. So the tree map, I'm not sure of the interest of a tree map, but let's do the tree map anyway. For some reason, the tree map appealed to me when I was doing it. And these are, of course, algorithms provided by a third-party piece of software, which I've licensed. So I have a license to distribute it, so you're not in any trouble. So I don't know. Interesting, huh? A box. Anyway, what else have we got? We've got the orthogonal, which isn't bad. Again, these are all just alternative ways of documenting the data model. Let's see what orthogonal gives. Let's choose Garage again. Oh yeah, sort of like a wheel. That's quite kind of fun, I think. Anyway, so, and last but not least is the fractal one. The fractal one it's probably best if we use a very large project for the fractal one. Yeah, so that's what a very large project looks like on a fractal display. If I resize this, it should eventually resize to fit the page, and it should give you an idea of the kind of display that, I mean, this would work only for really large and complex data models if you wanted to show off to people just how many entities and attributes and value lists you had. And this is still loading, in fact. Let's resize to fit and see what we get. Yeah, there we go. A fractal wheel and a half. I'm not sure of the interest of that, but anyway, you can play around with all those. Obviously, the main reason you want to get a display that you're happy with is because you intend to do some kind of export. So there are two kinds of export that you're going to be able to do. Let's go back and choose a more realistic one. Choose benefits, because benefits is a good one. Okay, so here's a benefits one, a reasonable model. Of course, you're going to want to maybe save it to SVG. The SVG export is the fastest one. It's also, in my opinion, the best rendering, but you can also do a PDF export as well. Both of those should work okay. The PDF one, there's no kind of visual feedback as to how long it's going to take, so you just have to wait until the PDF file appears on wherever you saved it. So I saved it on the desktop, so I just have to wait until that PDF file appears. So I've got an SVG and I've got a PDF file. So the PDF file, as you can see, it's, well, exactly what you'd expect. So you've got a nice little data model. The SVG, in my opinion, is much easier to manipulate. And obviously you can, if you have an SVG editor, you can pull pieces out of this. You can stick it in PowerPoint. It's much easier to deal with than a PDF file, in my opinion. And that's just about it. You can also print, of course. You can print it to a page. You can change the orientation. I've got a printer connected to this PC, so I'm not going to do it. And that just about wraps it up. I hope you enjoy playing with it as much as I enjoyed playing with it. Take care.